Skipster is the guest management platform used by top event teams for everything from guest lists to seating charts and online invitations. If you're looking for next-generation event software that helps deliver perfect guest experiences, head over to Skipster's website. It's Skipster, ZKIPSTER.com to try a free event.
Are you a follower?
9, 8.
Okay, so we're gonna probably add.
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Hi, David.
Hey, Beth. Here we are, another edition of GatherGeeks.
Our guest today is Kyla Knudson. At the time of this interview, she was the Director of Sales and Marketing for Business Events Canada, which is part of Destination Canada. She has since landed a new job as Director of Sales for Teneo Hospitality Group. She's going to take us on a tour of Canadian cities, highlighting food and beverage trends, unique and memorable experiences from wellness to wildlife adventures, and more. So this episode is Canada 101 for U.S. planners and others who want to learn about what's on offer up north.
Wow, let's listen. So Kyla, we're going to talk Canada today. We're here in MPI's World Education Conference in Toronto, and it was a big deal to get this conference to Toronto. Tell us how you feel it's been going and what Americans are feeling about their experience in Canada from what you've seen so far in the last 3 days.
That's great. Well, thank you, David, for having us. We're absolutely thrilled that MPI is back in Toronto, actually. The last time that MPI was in Canada, I believe, was in 2010 in Vancouver. So 9 years ago. So we are absolutely thrilled that we're inviting folks back to our country. And it's been an amazing experience because I'm always surprised how many Americans have not been to Canada before. I think that I try as much as I can to chat with as many planners as I can throughout the conference, and it just is so eye-opening to chat with our American friends and how many of them have yet to discover our country. So we are so thrilled when we have events like MPI here.
And what do you think was the reaction to the people that have never been here? Like, what do they say to you? Because you must be oh my God, you must be getting all of those responses. What are you hearing?
I think the most common response that I get is, why did I wait so long? They might say, goodness gracious, I live in New York or I live in Washington, D.C., and it's a quick hour flight up to Canada. Why did it take me so long to get here?
What do you think the feeling, like everything comes down to Maya Angelou, and it's not what they say, it's what you made them feel. What do you think the feeling is when you come to Canada? When you come generically, I mean, that's probably the worst question you can ask, but there is an answer to that.
I think that people love to see how warm and welcoming Canadians are. I know that that's a stereotype and everyone hears that, but I think that they are genuinely pleased and delighted that that's actually the experience that they have, that Canadians are happy to chat with them on the street, they're welcoming them, and they're warm and friendly and open. So.
And I believe that it reflects, though, in when you have meetings and events here, there's a certain aspect of collaboration that happens that causes a lot of magic when people connect, which doesn't necessarily happen in other parts of the world. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree, David, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think that the tourism folks within Canada, we always call each other friendly competitors, or not Business Events Canada, but our partners. So perhaps Tourism Vancouver or Winnipeg or Ottawa or wherever, they might be competing for a piece of business, but we very much have a collaborative mindset because our goal really is to bring someone to Canada. It doesn't matter if they don't pick one destination and they pick another and they're competing with it. We just want them to come to Canada because we know they're going to come back. And so we get that feedback from planners that they say, boy, do we ever like working with Team Canada per se, because you all might compete with each other or our partners might compete with each other, but at the end of the day, they're very much friendly competitors and they have that collaborative spirit.
The other thing that I've learned from this last 3 days here at MPI in Toronto is that people are craving authentic experiences. And that one thing about all of the destinations in Canada is that they are so different from what people are experiencing in the States. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's such a different culture that people come back kind of refreshed and feel something that's totally new.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you raise that point because we are very much going towards transformative experiences. We know that Canada offers so many experiences like going, nose to nose with a polar bear or kayaking with a beluga whale in their natural environment. I mean, these are experiences that you can't replicate anywhere else in the world. And it really does speak to that authenticity that Canada offers and the transformational experiences that Canada offers.
And give us an example of a transformational experience other than nose to nose with an animal.
Absolutely. Canada is very big on wellness. I think that you'll see that in cities and resorts across Canada. We actually just had Incentive Canada on Sonora Island, which is British Columbia, and then also Vancouver. And the opportunity for the clients to go on a boat and see a mother humpback whale and her calf in their natural environment and see the spray from that and be out in that kind of just breathtaking coastal rainforest. So many clients just said, it's such a reset in your life when you're out in nature and you have these kind of experiences that Canada offers. It really gives you a broader perspective and makes you sit back and think, this is more of what I need in my life, and it is a transformational experience.
So when you are talking to your American prospects and they say, okay, I want to try something in Canada that's transformative, like where do you tell them to go? Let's play destination bingo, I guess. What are some of the solutions that you would offer to them?
Sure. Well, there are so many, David. I mean, it's hard to say.
Well, let's start on the East Coast.
Okay, let's start on the East Coast. I mean, there's a place in Eastern Canada in the Maritimes. St. John's is known as Canada's Iceberg Alley. Having a martini where your ice is actually from an iceberg there and watching the icebergs actually float by this amazing, colorful town. That is a wow for a lot of people. And
you can have a meeting there as well?
Absolutely.
And what kind of facilities do they have there?
Absolutely. They have some fantastic facilities there in the Maritimes. Halifax is actually the largest city within the Maritimes, and we get a lot of groups that are actually focused on ocean science research and marine technology and that sort of things that are happening within the Maritimes. But it's a great spot to head to and have some of these unique experiences and see some of the whales out that way too.
So let's go down the coast a little bit.
Okay.
What would your next and also give us a little sense of the cuisine in these places as well.
Oh my goodness! Let's eat our way across Canada.
I've done a Canadian cuisine tour.
Okay.
And I do believe that people's cuisine tastes do have an influence.
Absolutely.
So tell us, what's your next choice? We'll go with your top 10. How about
Sure.
that?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, do you like oysters, David?
I love oysters.
Well, PEI, Prince Edward Island, home of Anne of Green Gables and a fantastic location. PEI, oysters are world famous, right? I'm sure that you have them in New York at some of the restaurants that you dine at.
They're really expensive.
They're worth it.
Yeah, they're worth it.
So who doesn't want to have some PEI oysters?
And so what's the convention center connected to? It's like the convention center connected to the oysters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go for the oysters, come for the meeting.
Exactly. Charlottetown actually is the capital of Prince Edward Island. So it's a wonderful boutique-style convention center. So it's a great spot within the Maritimes. And then speaking of cuisine, I do have to head to Quebec. Have you been to Quebec City recently,
David? I have not
David?
been to Quebec City recently.
Okay.
Tell us about Quebec.
Okay.
I've just talked to the people that run Quebec,
the
city.
All right. Well, I'm actually heading there next week. The American Society of Association Executives is having their executive leadership forum there. In Quebec City, we always say, if you love Europe, Quebec City is Europe so close. It really is the cradle.
It's a walled city.
Exactly. The only UNESCO walled city within North America. And the cuisine there, incredible. Everybody knows poutine. And of course, poutine was invented in Quebec. But there's a fantastic culinary scene, a sugar cabin or a cabane de sucre in Quebec. Have you done one of those experiences where everything is all maple all the time?
I've had a lot of maple here at the MPI WEC. There seems to be that and everything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Anthony Bourdain actually went up to Quebec, and when he filmed in Quebec, he went out to a sugar shack and did some of that. But our American meeting planners, Canadians are very familiar with it, but Americans aren't, and they love bringing that experience to Americans that maybe haven't had that.
Without the jet lag.
That's right. Exactly. Without the jet lag and without the price, right?
Without the price, yeah. Okay, what's next on the tour?
We're eating across Canada.
Kyla,
Yes, yeah. Let's eat across Canada. Oh my
So
goodness.
you got to go to Montreal next? Is that
Yes,
so?
Montreal has an incredible gastronomy scene, actually. Of course, I love the beef tourtière, which is famous in Quebec as well. It's a beef pie. I love that. I know it's an old school dish, that's for sure, but it's one of my favorites. It's kind of comfort food, I think, for the French. So have you had that before, David?
No, it seems like I have a lot on my list that I've got to eat through Canada.
Let's take this on the road. Let's go on a dining tour.
Yeah. Dining and meeting.
Exactly. That would be fantastic. And then, of course, if you're heading to the prairies, the prairies is home to some of the top-notch beef within the world, right? A colleague of mine actually lived in Japan for a number of years, and she's a Canadian, and she said she went to Japan, she went to a market, and one of the beef vendors there said, "Oh, I have this amazing beef for you. It's from Alberta."
So, okay, what are the markets in Alberta that we should be going and doing are, of course, Edmonton,
which
I've been to and spoken at.
Fantastic.
And Saskatchewan, what are the places
That's the
in
province,
Saskatchewan?
The capital of Saskatchewan is, of course, Regina.
Regina is fantastic.
Yes, great. The Queen City. And then
yes.
Saskatoon. I was actually...
Saskatoon,
yeah,
yes,
I
I
was
love
just
that.
in Saskatoon.
Yes.
And they actually are one of the top protein replacement research facilities in Canada. So beefless burgers.
Well, that's going to be the future. One of the biggest trends
It
is no meat at events, even though you are big beef producers.
Yeah. Well, we served actually a beefless patty on the opening reception on Saturday night, actually, and that was really speaking to Saskatoon and that center.
And they've got meeting facilities and
Absolutely.
not far. It's
Absolutely.
very reachable.
Yep, absolutely. Paris of the Prairies, they're known of.
That's Paris of the Prairies.
That's a Paris of the Prairies.
Much cheaper than going to Paris.
Yes, exactly. They have one of the largest, or the largest Picasso art collection.
Okay, so now we've done Edmonton,
Calgary.
We've done Calgary.
Don't
Let's
forget
talk Calgary.
Yeah, the Calgary Stampede coming up in a few weeks.
That's right. And
Alberta
Calgary without the
Beef.
Stampede is also fantastic.
True.
And
Absolutely.
it's also a very, very progressive city.
Very much so.
Big scene, art scene there too.
Yeah. And the first Muslim mayor of Canada actually is in
Really?
Calgary. Mayor Naheed Nenshi is one of the most beloved mayors within Canada. So very progressive.
Building a memorable experience for your guest means planning every detail right. Skipster is the guest management platform designed to help you create the perfect experience, from impressive online invitations to seamless check-in at the door. Get started at Skipster, spelled ZKIPSTER.com, for a free test event. So, because let's go more towards
West.
Let's go west.
Banff and Lake Louise.
Banff and Lake Louise.
Banff
Tell
and
us a
Lake
little bit about that.
Louise. Yeah, the sort of jewel of the Canadian Rockies there, and beautiful, beautiful culinary scene there. They're very, very much into the wild game and wild fish, and very much that local wild cuisine there. So you can have elk, of course. There's bison is huge right now within Canada. A lot of people are farming bison. Great culinary boar. There's a lot.
A lot of
that.
facilities, a lot of venues
Sure.
and facilities there.
You bet. The Banff Center for
beautiful.
Creativity.
Yeah.
Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, I'm sure you've stayed at. Fairmont Chateau
right.
Lake Louise, and the Rimrock Resort Hotel, one of my favorites.
Yes.
Yeah.
We got so much to work with in this country.
We do.
We haven't even gotten to Vancouver yet.
No, we haven't.
So tell us about Vancouver.
Vancouver. So have you eaten candied salmon, David?
I have not. Oh my God! I feel like I am so far behind. I got my bucket list just got like 100 things more in it.
My goodness, candied salmon is one of my favorite Canadian cuisines.
I have heard about the pastries. There's a story in the New York Times recently about a dessert item that I forgot the name of.
I'm trying to think what it would be.
It's a bar. It's Nemo bar.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Evidently is a big thing. Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, of course, a lot of people are familiar with Vancouver, but a lot of hidden gems out on the west. Victoria, which is the capital of British Columbia, named after Queen Victoria, famous for high tea. We need to go there and have high tea.
Did they have authentic high tea?
Yes, authentic high tea.
Oh my
yes,
God, that's
authentic
great.
high tea in Victoria. And then Richmond, I haven't been myself, but Richmond, British Columbia, which is part of the greater Vancouver area, has the dumpling trail. So we can go and do a famous night market, Asian night
Wow.
market, and then go on the dumpling trail.
Well, the Asian influence there is incredible.
yeah, best sushi.
So also one of the things I know about Canada is that the new Canadians have a huge influence, that this is one of the most diverse places in the world.
Exactly.
How has that impacted the world of business events? Is it attracted people who do business around the world coming here to meet their relatives and friends?
Yeah,
Is that true?
absolutely. Yeah, 50% of Torontonians are actually born outside of Canada. So Toronto is the most diverse city within Canada.
I think it's the most diverse in the world, isn't it?
I think it is number
Yeah.
one or number two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And so, people love to go somewhere where it's a different experience, but they also feel comfortable.
Right.
And I think people love to come to a city where not only can they have a unique experience, but they know that there's also some familiar faces and familiar customs and familiar food that they can enjoy. And I think that's part of what makes Canada so welcoming,
Yep.
is that we have a diverse population.
You're not only are you welcoming, you are welcoming in people from around the world that can't get into other places.
Correct.
So there's no wall.
Correct.
and that seems to be very much of a positive part of the culture here, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. One of our taglines is certainly open minds and open hearts. And you're right that Canadians, we are a country of immigrants and we love to welcome people from around the world. And so I think that a lot of international conventions, when they're looking where in the world should they have an international convention, Canada is often thought of first and foremost because we are very welcoming to countries around the world.
Right. So we've done a little bit of the world tour on food and venues and things like that. What are the misconceptions that you have to deal with every day in selling Canada to an American audience?
I think a lot of the times Americans think that we're further than we are. Whereas, the reality is that Canada's major urban centers and population lives within 100 miles of the U.S. border. So going from Washington, D.C. up to Toronto is really no different than going from Washington, D.C. to Chicago. And I think people are always surprised to find out just how close Canada is and how accessible it is.
The other big barrier that people had, in my perception, was it's hard to get in. But I do believe in the last year and a half, the electronic passport system has increased the you don't have to wait on these huge lines anymore at all. They've solved that problem.
Exactly.
Correct? Is that
there's the global entry.
Global entry is
program.
helping the Nexus for you
Absolutely.
guys.
Yeah, the
and
Nexus. Yeah, and then of course, exactly the electronic passports. And we're also finding that the passport rule or requirement for Americans, it's been in place for a long, long time. So we're also finding too that a lot more Americans do have passports than they
it's not
didn't.
like the
it
old days
wasn't
when
back
you just
15 years ago.
bring your license. I
Yeah.
remember you can come in with your license.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I think it's just also unfamiliarity sometimes, with the little things. What do you need to come to Canada? And it's a passport, and it's an easy process to secure that. And knowing the currency, you can use your Visa and your MasterCard. You can use your credit cards
So talking
here.
about currency, there is the exchange rate, which
Yes.
is very, very favorable. And of course, we cannot sell that because that may not always be the case.
Right.
Because you got to sell the value. But
Absolutely.
currently, this is the time to come to Canada. It's about a 30% discount.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Actually, I looked at it this morning. So it absolutely fluctuates, but historically the Canadian dollar, much to the chagrin of Canadian travelers, the Canadian dollar is historically lower than the US dollar. So it's always representing a great value. And, Americans would be excited. You buy a $100 pair of shoes in Canada, you see it on your credit card statement when you come back to the US, and it's only $75.
Right. So
that's
this is
what
the
it is
time.
today.
So all event organizers out there who want to explore and go on trips to check it out this is the time to do it.
Definitely.
This is the time to do it.
Definitely.
What's going on the big event world from a Canadian perspective that are in the future? Like what are the big things that people should know about?
Sure. Well, we have some exciting industry events actually that are confirmed within Canada. So next year, the Global Site Conference is actually going to be in 2020 in Vancouver. So we're really excited about that. That's coming up on the horizon. Of course, MPI being in Toronto this year. ASA Executive Leadership Forum is always held in Canada, a different location every year. But, the cities are booming and a lot of international groups within the life sciences industry are coming to Canada within our sectors. So there's a lot going on. Just so many, actually, David. I can't think off the top of my head more than that.
Right. We don't have no Olympics yet.
No Olympics.
We've been through that.
Yes.
Calgary
definitely came close.
Yeah. Calgary came close. So what is your final advice to American businesses that want to host their board meetings and what kind of meetings should they be bringing here to test it out?
All and any. And I think that Canada is such a safe, easy place to do conventions. You don't even have to test it out, David. We know that a lot of the times people will want to bring a board meeting or a leadership retreat here, a smaller program to test it out. But we get so many large international conventions. They feel so comfortable booking within Canada that, they're comfortable bringing their big conventions here. And Business Events Canada is the division of Destination Canada. So we aim to be the first point of contact to really help and square away clients.
And what do you do? What should somebody know about the services that you provide that could help them that they may not even know to ask you?
Absolutely. So there's a number of federal programs like the International Event Recognition Program that is a program by Canada Border Service Agency. It's free and it helps facilitate the movement of goods and people across the border. Easy to take advantage of that. So we can connect them with these different programs. There's also a rebate program that's run by Canada Revenue Agency.
What does that mean?
Yeah, and so it's actually for clients on their master account. If they're headquartered outside of Canada, if 75% of their attendees or more are coming to Canada from outside of Canada and they don't have a business number in Canada, they can actually receive the federal goods and services tax and provincial tax back on their master account. So it's a great financial incentive on top of the favorable exchange rate.
And what is that tax percentage in a sense?
Well, there's a 5% federal tax rate across Canada.
For the hotel stays and things like that?
Yeah, goods and services tax. And then there's also a provincial tax at most of the provinces.
So people can save another 7, 10, 8%?
Oh,
maybe?
yeah. It can add up to a lot of dollars.
What other little tricks should you tell us about? These the ears of the people listening from associations are perking up.
We also have something that's called Border to Show. So when people are bringing large conventions that have exhibits here, you can actually have a Canada Border Service agent clear your goods at the convention center instead of having them cleared at a general warehouse. So it really gives meeting planners that peace of mind that all of their freight will make it across the border and be tracked specifically. And it's again, free and easy.
Anything else? Yeah, that's stuff. Oh, what about drayage?
Yes.
Drayage. So you're talking drayage in that last comment.
Yeah, exactly.
So is drayage not an issue here?
No. So I mean that's
huge.
Yeah, it's a question that comes up regularly, and that's why we really talk about the Border to Show program, and then also using our customs brokers. And it was interesting. I had a discussion with an association planner the other day, and she said, we had a customs broker, Kyla, but the nominal fee that I had for the customs broker was more than outweighed by the rebate program that she received from Canada Revenue Agency.
Wow, right.
So,
So, as we end, what is your sort of message to both the U.S. market and the Canadian market about doing business in Canada today?
Sure. Well, the time is now. I think that that's what a lot of the planners that have come to MPI have realized, that why haven't they looked at Canada before if they haven't? And many that have met here have said, boy, it just reminds me what a great experience it is. Let's look at it again. And I think it's just reminding people, don't forget about Canada. I think sometimes, it's easy to throw out the cities that you know off the top of your head. And I think just reminding folks that don't forget about the North and the amazing experiences that are offered here.
Great. Well, thank you. So how can people get in touch with you?
Sure. So our team is, you can see our team roster at businesseventscanada.ca. And if you go to how to help, you'll see our staff listing, and we have representatives in the United States as well as UK.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
Okay, David, we're back. The message, I think, is really getting across to some planners here in the U.S. Some high-profile events have recently moved to Canada. Two that come to mind are the Collision Conference that went to Toronto and the Engage Wedding Summit, which came to Banff in 2018.
Yeah, Collision is a huge deal. And they've got, I think, 2 or 3 year deal there. So they're going to be there for a while. And Canada is really a pretty cool place. Not to mention that the exchange rate really makes a lot of sense to do an event there.
No small consideration.
Yeah, it's definitely the place. And it's so easy to get through customs now. I was just there yesterday, and it was literally... The new technology makes it so easy to get through. Lines were short, and I zipped right through.
From the front lines. I love it. That's great to hear.
From the front lines. So, Beth, what's going on at BizBash?
Well, this issue is super timely for me because our editorial team is in the middle of production on BizBash Best Canada, which is our first issue dedicated to Canadian venues. So this is on my mind in a big way right now. I'm fully immersed. So to our listeners, keep your eyes out for that to dig even deeper into these destinations that you heard about on this podcast. So this is more of a coming soon, and I'll update everyone when that issue is out later this year.
And we also have another feature in that issue that we just did in our one of our other editions.
I mean, should I spill the beans?
Should we?
Why not?
Why not?
Let's do it. It's the BizBash Canada 250. It's 250 of the top event professionals in the country. So we've been working really hard on this to identify and share with you these people for networking purposes, for potential partners. Some of these people appeared on our inaugural BizBash 500, which was the US and Canada. But this year we have split those lists, and we look forward to presenting that later in this issue.
Fantastic. And before we go, we want to thank all the people involved in putting this podcast together. Claire Hoffman, who handles all of our editorial duties. Rebecca Pappas, that gets it out to you and handles all the distribution. And Dave Nelson, our producer. So thank you all for helping us present this podcast. What do we say, Beth?
Gather on.
Gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.